This is BBC One. Now Panorama with Jane Corbin.
Tonight, Panorama reports from Iran, the Islamic Republic, intent on building up its arsenal and dominating the Gulf. We ask, is the West right to accuse the heirs of Khomeini of developing weapons of mass destruction? And what is the evidence of Iran arming for Islam?
Switzerland, the early hours of a freezing February morning 2 weeks ago. A car heads for the mountains, its destination the small town of Wold. Unknown visitors are on their way to a factory where equipment awaits dispatch abroad. Equipment which the visitors believe is destined for Iran, to manufacture deadly toxins for a biological weapons program. The strangers expertly force an entry, leaving virtually no trace. Someone has decided to act after months of warnings. Explosives are placed with deadly accuracy. The mausoleum of the founder of Iran's Islamic State is today a place of pilgrimage. The philosophy of Ayatollah Khomeini still exerts a powerful influence. His religious revolution continues to shape the decisions of the nation's leaders. During the Ayatollah's time, Iran was crippled by war and shunned by the West, who feared his radical message. The crowds who surround his tomb to pay their respects are still faithful to his ideals, but it is time to move ahead, to modernize and rebuild. The West has reasons to welcome this, but there are dangers too.
It's nearly 4 years now since the architect of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini, died. Some people would argue that today Iran has embarked on a more moderate, or at least a more pragmatic path. But others still suspect Iranian ambitions. They point to the growing arsenal of weapons in this country as evidence of its expansionist aims. These critics would urge all Western countries to deny Iran the sophisticated technology that it wants to get. But is this justified? Is the West, and in particular the United States, just paranoid about Iran? Or is the Islamic Republic actively seeking to get non-conventional weaponry, and most alarming of all, the means to make a nuclear bomb?
What is of concern is the Iranians' determination to pursue weapons of mass destruction in all of the categories: biological weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, and also the missiles to deliver them.
Robert Gates' exclusive interview with Panorama reinforces his outspoken comments to Congress last November.
Iran is building up its special weapons capabilities as part of a massive across-the-board effort.
As President Bush's director of the CIA, he based his assessment of Iran's intentions on a special intelligence survey. But prominent Iranian politicians dismiss it as just Western propaganda.
It is not in the interest of any country in the region to build up on nuclear, on chemical weaponry. And we are very much open to international supervision. And we think that those external powers, they need to propagate the fear of Iran to kind of make their presence justified in the area, make their huge sale of armament justified to the area. So I think there is a kind of vicious circle going around in here.
But although the voice of pragmatists is heard increasingly, To the outside world, Iran is still an alien and unpredictable place. At Friday prayers, the military bedrock of the regime is clear. Anti-Western sentiment is still expressed here. So too is the desire to export the revolution. With the vacuum created by Iraq's defeat by the Allies, the West fears Iranian resurgence, a dangerous mix of religious extremism and the purchase of a wide array of weapons.
Revolutionary Iran appears to be marching to different music to the rest of the world. I mean, they have people assassinated in other people's capitals. Their religious leader condemns a writer to death, and people offer large sums of money for this to be carried out. I mean, this is really very bizarre and unusually unacceptable international behavior.
But Iran's behavior cannot be ignored. The country occupies a significant place in a dangerous region, made more volatile in the aftermath of Desert Storm. Iran controls access to the Persian Gulf, and thus half the world's oil supplies. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states fear Iran's aggressive claim to disputed local islands and its religious fervour, and are themselves arming with Western help. To the east lies Afghanistan, racked by civil war, and to the north new Muslim Central Asian states facing an uncertain future. But Iraq is the biggest threat of all. Saddam is still in power, and Tehran fears him.
Geography has dealt Iran a pretty bad hand. And if you look round at the moment, I mean, they have Ba'athist Iraq on their western frontier. They had an 8-year war with them. They suffered the loss of virtually of a generation like we lost between 1914 and 18. Now, in those circumstances, I think any Iranian government of any complexion would rebuild its armed forces after the 8-year war they've had and would present a fairly firm defensive front to the outside world.
Iraq may be the nation which has prompted Iran's defensive posture, but Saddam Hussein has also provided a lesson in how to develop weapons of mass destruction. In the wake of Desert Storm, United Nations inspectors found the Iraqis had developed significant chemical, biological and nuclear programs with the help of Western technology. By buying widely a broad range of dual-use equipment with both civil and military applications and putting it together back home, they had managed to circumvent Western export controls on arms.
We went to 4 different locations in the Baghdad area. I'd rather not.
David Kay, who investigated Iraq's nuclear program, believes Iran has learnt some valuable lessons.
Iran, in many ways, is like Iraq at the early stage of the Iraqi program. That is, it's a shop until you drop strategy, essentially, trying to acquire technical skills, training, technology, and manufacturing capability on as broad a front as possible.
The Iranian procurement effort has ranged across the globe, and Panorama has followed the trail to Kazakhstan, the Central Asian state, which inherited nuclear hardware from the Soviet Union. And to the other side of the world, the high-tech mecca of the West, California. And then from the United States back across the Atlantic Ocean, to Europe, to Britain, Germany and Hungary. We've been seeking evidence of the Iranian drive for technology to develop nuclear, chemical and biological programs. Our story begins in Switzerland. Switzerland, Wold. It was in this quiet town 2 weeks ago a factory was bombed, and not for the first time. Last year, the firm which makes microbiology equipment completed 2 Iranian orders. The company, Bioengineering, understood these were for vitamin production. They were sabotaged. Such equipment can also be used for making biological weapons. This latest shipment, the firm says, was going to Austria, but they'd been warned not to let it go anywhere abroad, in case it ended up in the wrong hands.
The Swiss authorities had warned the company not to export to Iran. But they could only recommend this as permission to export was not actually required by law.
Nicht bewilligungspflichtig ist.
But bioengineering went ahead regardless, and again the saboteurs struck. They left this mysterious note, claiming responsibility on behalf of an unknown Iranian opposition group. It alleged political prisoners were used as guinea pigs in biological weapons tests. It said,
Their bellies swelled up and their skin turned blue. They slowly went blind, and they brought up almost all the blood in their bodies until they slowly met their death.
But there's been speculation the Israeli Secret Service was really responsible because of the expert way the attack was carried out.
Wer hinter dem Anschlag steht, kann zurzeit noch nicht gesagt werden.
At the moment, it isn't possible to say who's behind this attack. It's pure speculation that it may be the work of Mossad.
Tatsache ist,
The fact is, however, that the work was very professionally carried out.
ausgeführt wurde.
مرا ببوس مرا ببوس برای آخرین بار.
If any nation understands the suffering brought about by war, it is Iran. The cemeteries stretch for miles around the country, the resting place of 1 million men killed in 8 years of conflict against Iraq. The war has left an enduring scar on the psyche of the nation. Sorrow and the fear of further slaughter. Every family lost someone, a father, son or brother. Iran will never again be unprepared for battle.
I am Abbas Ismailipur, and this is my father. This is my brother. Here also lies his friend, who suffered martyrdom with him. They were fighting in the same area and were killed together. After 5 years, we got news that their bodies were identified from their dog tags, and the remains were returned to us. And over there behind me is my cousin, who was martyred as well.
Iran suffered not only from the scale of slaughter, but the barbarous methods that were used. This nation will never forget that the world stood by while crude but effective weapons of mass destruction were launched against its people.
During the last few decades, we have been maybe the first victim of the use of chemical weapons. This is against the Islamic values because this is a mass destruction weapon, and if it is used, it will kill the innocent people, the civilians, during the war which was imposed on us. Some of our cities and villages were bombarded by the chemical bombs, and many thousands of our civilians, Iranians, were killed. And I can reiterate here that this is against Islamic values.
In January, in Paris, a historic meeting took place. Dr. Veliati was amongst representatives of 67 nations, gathered to pledge an end to the manufacture of chemical weapons. But Iran's actions don't match its public stance. Western intelligence agencies have warned their governments that Iran, remembering the experience of the war, has already amassed significant chemical stockpiles.
I can tell you that we do have evidence of a chemical weapons program that includes choking, blister, and blood agents in the chemical weapons arena. The estimates of their stockpile range from a few hundred tons to up to 2,000 tons of chemical stockpile.
Hungary, Budapest. In the late 1980s, Eastern Europe was opening up. eager for hard currency. Export controls were almost non-existent. Panorama has discovered this is where the Iranians bought much of the technology to make their chemical weapons. They came to Lampart, a long-established manufacturer of equipment for the chemical industry. The factory's run-down appearance belies the specialized nature of the glass enamel-lined vessels it makes, the sort of equipment capable of handling the corrosive substances used in chemical warfare. We visited Lampart. They admit they export to Iran, and we wanted to find out more.
Good morning, good morning. We're from the BBC. I wonder, could we speak to Mrs. Fognoli, the commercial director?
We wanted to know from the company's commercial director if Lampart, as we understood, had made deals worth over £2 million with the Revolutionary Guard, the militant Islamic unit responsible for chemical weapons procurement. Mrs. Fognodi then appeared.
Mrs. Fognodi, we're from the BBC. I wonder if we could ask you some questions. We sent you a letter with some questions. I beg your pardon?
Do you have a translator?
Yes.
Mrs. Fognodi didn't want to give a verbal answer.
So you're not prepared to answer our questions here face to face?
Tehát így személyesen nem akarnak válaszolni a kérdésekre.
Nem arról van szó, hogy nem akarunk válaszolni a kérdésekre, hogy nem értünk egyet a kérdésekkel.
She says it's not the question that we don't want to answer, we just don't agree with the questions.
The company have argued that their equipment isn't the kind suitable for chemical weapons production. But when we looked at Lampart's brochure, it's clear the firm's glass enamel-lined reactors are highly resistant to extreme temperatures and corrosion, handling almost all acids up to 200 degrees centigrade. These are the kind of vessels needed to handle the extremely potent chemical reactions required to make mustard gas and nerve agent chemical weapons. Lampart did give us a written statement in which they say that all their exports now fall within the regulations recently introduced by the new Hungarian government. But the company refused to comment at all on the details of their trade with Iran. What they sell and where it goes to, they say, must remain a trade secret. Lampart's continuing business with Iran has prompted a number of Western governments to put pressure on the Hungarian authorities to apply stricter export controls. But Trade Ministry officials here admit it could be too late.
What concern or how much concern would the Hungarian government have if some of this equipment had ended up in the wrong hands, as it were, in Iran?
I think the Hungarian government is very sensitive about this. The export control issue have been made as one of the prime indicators of our belonging to the Western community, so we do understand all the concerns and we do share them.
So given that exports have already happened in the past, is there some possibility they could have ended up, as it were, in the wrong hands in Iran?
Theoretically, a lot of things could have happened because they were not controlled. We haven't had the possibility to follow them up, and we didn't have to.
It's too late now to stop Iran creating chemical weapons, but the West has an even greater fear. Some Iranian leaders have questioned why the Islamic world should not have a nuclear bomb, as Israel has. Ancient Isfahan has long been famous for its religious schools and the quality of its learning. But today, the city of minarets and mosques is also home to an ambitious nuclear research centre where journalists and cameras are forbidden. When the mullahs overthrew the monarchy 14 years ago, the Shah's technological drive was condemned as un-Islamic and modernization was frowned upon. But that is changing as Iran struggles to rebuild itself. Today, even in the religious schools, the clerics and their pupils discuss the benefits science and technology can bring to the Islamic revolution.
We hold firmly to the Islamic principles, and insofar as there is nothing contrary to the principles of our own religion, it is no problem to assimilate technology and modern ideas. In fact, most modern ideas are completely compatible with Islam.
The debate amongst the clerics is mirrored in Iranian society at large, and at the highest levels of the government, where politicians argue Iran should master all the scientific techniques of the modern world without exception.
We are a huge nation with a huge human resource. We have very intelligent people, scientists. It is very impossible and impractical, I think, in the modern world to keep a nation from advancement.
As part of their drive for advancement, the Iranians are developing an ambitious nuclear program. As well as Isfahan, there are facilities for mining uranium, building sites for nuclear power stations, and a growing number of research centers. The nuclear program has its headquarters in the capital, Tehran. We went to see the man in charge, Reza Amrollahi, director of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, a powerful government figure. He's never spoken publicly before. He's believed to be behind the drive to get the bomb. He insists Iran's aims are purely peaceful.
Our long-term objective is to produce electricity from nuclear energy. Of course, in order to achieve this objective, we have to carry out the necessary preparations and set up a proper framework. But I reiterate, we are really pursuing the peaceful use of atomic power.
We were told by the Minister for Atomic Energy that we would be able to visit some of Iran's nuclear research facilities. The Islamic Republic, he said, wants to be open. It has nothing to hide. But after 3 weeks' prevarication, at last we were told that it would not, after all, be possible. The gates of all the nuclear establishments remained firmly shut.
There's a variety of evidence that I believe would suggest that their intentions are not purely designed or purely toward the development of electric power, but in fact toward the development of a weapons program.
Do the Americans have such evidence? Is there hard evidence?
I think that there is sufficient evidence to allow the conclusion that I've described.
Suspicions about Iran's nuclear program began even in the Shah's time, when Bushehr, a power station, was started by German engineers. Many questioned why such an oil-rich country needed nuclear power. The Islamic regime tried to get the contract completed, but fearing the plant might help Iran develop an atomic bomb, the German authorities blocked the project.
What was it that you feared about the Iranian program that caused you to withdraw the licenses for Bushehr? What was it specifically?
Well, on the one side, there are a lot of intelligence coverage, as you will know, on certain ambitions in that area. I am not an intelligence man myself, so I can only refer to it. So that is something which governments have to care about.
Sometimes I must admit it is really difficult for us to fathom what all this hue and cry is about and what this uproar of negative publicity is for. And it makes us very sad and hurt to hear people say that our nuclear industry is actively engaged in the development of unfriendly implements.
It's not just the Iranian civil power program that's caused alarm. The country has signaled its intentions to explore other nuclear areas too. Iran already has a small research reactor like this one. It's used for experiments in nuclear physics, and it's a valuable teaching tool. Its byproduct is minute quantities of plutonium, the raw material for a bomb. But now the Iranians are buying a research reactor 30 times the size, capable of producing significant amounts of plutonium.
We know that the Iranians have been seeking nuclear reactors from a number of countries, from Argentina, India, and others. The information that we have suggests that the kind of reactors they have sought are more suited or optimized for the production of plutonium than they are for the production of nuclear electric power. And that is one of the sources of our concern. They have now reached an agreement with the Chinese for a reactor that is a good reactor, as far as we know, for the production of plutonium, at least potentially. And this is what is of concern to us.
The Chinese reactor sale has now been publicly announced. But Iran has other secret nuclear deals. Panorama has uncovered some of these. In the former Soviet Union, in Kazakhstan, an Iranian delegation has bought uranium pellets and a rare metal. In Germany and Britain, Iran's been placing orders for components needed to enrich uranium to weapons grade. And in the United States, Iran's been after high-tech computers with a military use. California, Newport Beach.
Wouldn't it be nice if we were older, then we wouldn't have to wait so long?
This sunny resort has now provided evidence of the Iranian drive to acquire restricted high technology and smuggle it abroad. The area is known as the New Silicon Valley. It specializes in high-tech computers. In January, the airport was the scene of a successful bid to thwart Iranian purchases. Commerce Department agents seized an advanced computer just before it was to leave this warehouse for Tehran.
What we did was to stop an export of this IBM ES9000 computer as we believed it was going to Iran from Los Angeles airport here. It has a lot of sophisticated applications, some of which are military, manufacturing nuclear devices. You can use it in defense planning. So it has a lot of dual-use commercial and military applications. We followed it here to the airport, seized the equipment, and arrested the two individuals last night.
Reza Zandian, an Iranian citizen who owned two local computer companies, and Charles Rager, the American who managed them, were arrested and will shortly stand trial for violating U.S. export law. The investigators of the Commerce Department believe this case is just the visible tip of Iran's worldwide clandestine procurement network. England, Walton-on-Thames. The search for elements of a nuclear program led the Iranians here to the home counties. In the spring of 1991, they approached the firm Air Products, which supplies specialized gases. The Iranians placed an order with the company for 45 cylinders of fluorine, a gas with many industrial uses, but also an ingredient in a process to enrich uranium to weapons grade. Air Products was told by the customer, an obscure technical university called Sharif, that the gas was to be used in research laboratories for academic purposes, and had no reason to think otherwise. So the company duly applied for an export license from the Department of Trade. But alarm bells rang in Whitehall. The license was denied, and Air Products refused to supply the Iranians. The order was intended for a research project in one of Tehran's many academic institutions, home to skilled technicians and engineers in a range of specialties. It's believed some are engaged in nuclear research projects. Amongst these is Sharif University of Technology, which has been pinpointed by several Western governments as the center for a clandestine research program to enrich uranium by using high-speed centrifuges. This was the very method favored by Saddam Hussein's engineers in Iraq to make the nuclear fuel for an atomic bomb.
Centrifuge process is the most modern way of enriching uranium to weapons grade. In fact, it requires so little electricity that when you go into a centrifuge plant, it takes more electricity to turn the lights on in the plant than it does to run the centrifuges themselves. They're a jewel of modern 20th century industrial design.
Germany, Bonn. Like Iraq, Iran has bought technology for its program in Germany. The Iranian embassy here had already been used as a cover for buying military items. In 1991, Iran approached Thyssen, the industrial conglomerate. They wanted specialized magnets that can be used in a military centrifuge program. Thyssen told Panorama that they asked Sharif what the magnets would be used for, but they received no reply, and so they did not take up the order. But undaunted, Tehran continued the search with Magnet Fabrik in Bonn. The company have confirmed to us they have an Iranian order, but they refuse to say exactly who the contract is with or what it's for. Panorama has learned that diplomatic efforts are currently underway to determine its final uses. And the Iranians went to Leibold, a company that had exported items which ended up in Saddam's nuclear program. Leibold supplied a vacuum pump order to another university in Tehran. Sharif itself approached the engineers Karl Schenk for balancing machines, again an item with both civilian and military uses. The company told Panorama they fulfilled the order after Sharif assured them the equipment would not be used for military technical purposes.
We understand that a variety of equipment, including magnets, balancing machines and vacuum pumps, has been going to one particular destination in Iran. What would that suggest to you?
Well, in and of themselves, those are certainly the components that one would expect to find around a gas centrifuge program designed to enrich uranium to weapons-grade levels. You can't be sure just from the specifications, but certainly it's a key list that I think if anyone who knew about a centrifuge program and was concerned about proliferation heard that someone was getting them, their eyes would light up and the hair would literally stand on the back of your neck.
Mohammad Ayatollahi is the Islamic Republic's spokesman in the West on nuclear matters. It's his job to soothe outside fears about his government's activities.
There is some feeling that there may be a clandestine program operating out of some of your scientific institutions in Iran.
It's baseless. It's just a baseless accusation. It's a baseless fear that the Western media are disturbing even the Western public.
What about the Sharif Technical Institute in Tehran? There have been accusations that a centrifuge program is being operated out of there and that buying and selling is going on.
It's very strange. It's the first time I've heard that.
There have been reports from the West.
Well, there are reports everywhere. They make stories, I should say.
Central Asia, Kazakhstan. Here the Iranians have identified a nuclear source less protected than any in the West. In Almaty, the capital, echoes of the Soviet past remain. But now the country is independent and freedom has brought hardship too. The new republic must trade its natural resources to survive, and that has raised the spectre that Kazakhstan may be tempted to barter its unique Cold War inheritance.
Kazakhstan is the only Central Asian state to have inherited significant nuclear assets from the old Soviet Union. These include over 100 missiles and 40 strategic bombers. To the north of the capital at Semipalatinsk, the Russians tested the atom bomb. There are still scientists and technicians at those secret nuclear installations. And Kazakhstan continues to make most of the fuel used in Russia's nuclear reactors.
Though this is a secular state, the Kazakh people are Muslims and they are looking for new economic and political alliances with like-minded neighbors. Outside the presidential palace in Almaty, the workers chip away the ice. Spring is coming. Inside there is a group of visitors, a high-level delegation led by Iran's foreign minister. He's here to sign new agreements to foster trade. Iran's already been accused of meddling in this unstable region. There are fears they'll export the Islamic Revolution here. Dr. Veliati says it's only natural to cultivate the Central Asian states.
We have the same religion, the same tradition, the same history, the same culture. That's quite natural and understandable if we have good relations with them. And also, if they want, many of them want to have the free access to open sea. Iran is the best way for them. So strengthening of relations between Iran and Central Asian countries is quite natural and understandable.
But here in the snowy steppes, hundreds of miles north of Almaty, we discovered the Iranians have a particular trading interest. This is one of the former Soviet Union's most secret nuclear factories. Western intelligence sources have told Panorama that they believe that shipments from this factory here in Kazakhstan have gone to Iran. Those shipments include beryllium, classed as a strategic metal, a vital component for a nuclear weapon, and uranium dioxide pellets used as the fuel in a nuclear reactor. The factory is heavily guarded, but we discovered that impoverished conscripts here have already smuggled nuclear material out and tried to sell it. We were the first journalists to be allowed to enter the vast industrial complex, so secret that until recently the authorities didn't even acknowledge its existence. 16,000 people work here, enriching uranium into fuel pellets for power reactors. It's this early stage of enrichment which is most difficult. Any developing country wanting weapons-grade material would find the pellets valuable. And this factory is one of only 2 worldwide which makes beryllium, a rare metal used in nuclear bombs. We've learned an Iranian delegation came here in August. They bought beryllium and 100 tons of uranium. Factory managers would not be filmed. They did confirm the Iranian visit but claim they didn't sign a contract. Intelligence sources believe the deal was done. We understand the Iranians have been to a factory in Kazakhstan looking for the rare metal beryllium. What would that indicate to you, and is it of concern?
Beryllium is almost a magical element in terms of nuclear weapons design. It allows you to make the weapons package much smaller than it otherwise would. And the acquisition of beryllium technology is something that should be of great concern if the Iranians have in fact achieved that.
The Kazakh Trade Ministry should issue licenses for such sales, but the export system is just a few months old, and diplomats here say it's almost completely useless. The authorities say they know nothing about Iran's mission here, but they lack resources to police the system, and old Soviet defense factories are still a law unto themselves. The government is weak. You don't have the money to deal with these problems, and these big companies are very strong, are very independent, and they want to earn the currency.
These companies are meant to operate within the law, as if they were under state control. That's why, without permission from the government, and without the relevant licenses, it would be impossible for them to export, I think. Perhaps some of the old unofficial channels are still available, but I don't know anything about them.
Since the breakup of the Soviet Union, there's been concern and rumors about nuclear material finding its way abroad. Now it seems those fears are being realized. Iran says America is creating propaganda, but these sales raise questions about Iran's intentions.
There are many in the West that believe that Iran is actively seeking a military program, that you're going for the nuclear bomb.
I think it's absurd. You see, there are political pressures, and they use anything to provocate and to create a noise, a wave. It's totally absurd.
Is Iran going for the nuclear bomb?
No, absolutely not.
It's the job of the UN's nuclear watchdog to police countries like Iran, which have signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The International Atomic Energy Agency's been urged to watch the Islamic Republic closely. The IAEA has visited Iran. It has cameras inside the country's declared nuclear installations and uses time-lapse photography to ensure that nothing is diverted to a covert program. They say they're satisfied with what they've seen and find no evidence of a military program. But that is what they concluded with Iraq, and they were proved definitively wrong.
Do you think that Iran is trying to ultimately go for the nuclear bomb?
It would be wrong for me to pronounce any opinion
on that matter. We are reporting on what we are seeing rather than speculating. We are like a radar who scans the horizon and to tell you that this is what we are seeing now.
The IAEA philosophy of inspection has been based on trust and diplomacy, which is perfectly adequate if you're dealing with people who have no intention of developing a clandestine nuclear weapons program. The problem is knowing when you should abandon trust and diplomacy and get really tough with those states that in fact are trying to develop a clandestine nuclear weapons program.
The IAEA wanted to visit a place north of Tehran, Mualem Kalaya. They were helicoptered into the mountains. Since 1985, intelligence had suggested a secret weapons program at the site. They found nothing, but did they go to the right place?
I understand the mission in question chose not to take global positioning satellite instruments. These are instruments that tell you exactly where you are. In the case of Iraq, we found in Iraq that if we asked the Iraqis to take us someplace, they would happily take us someplace. It would not be the place we asked, however. And so you had to rely on independent means of verification.
We are inspectors, we are observers, we are not commando troops or commando raids. I think there has been a certain amount of romanticism after the Iraqi inspection. Some people feel that the kind of leap in on parachute is what we should do everywhere. Might have been possible, and it was possible in the case of Iraq and gave very good results there, but I don't think that you can apply that generally. I think there is some little grain of truth in the criticism. Maybe the agency has tended to become a little too bureaucratic, a little too mechanistic in it, and that a bit more of intrusiveness is desirable, and I think we are achieving that now. But I think that those who are criticizing us most are romantics.
Iran says it welcomes more inspections, but it's impossible to visit every corner of this vast country or penetrate this closed society. And the Americans aren't going to wait. They say this country is developing a military program. They want an all-out ban on any technology that could help them and warn unless this happens, Iran will, before long, get the bomb.
On the basis of the overall evidence that you have, what would be the timescale, possibly, of their acquisition of some nuclear deterrent, nuclear weapon?
Perhaps by the end of this decade. And I think that that is probably a reasonable estimate if they do not receive significant external support, particularly the acquisition of fissile material from foreign countries.
And if they do?
I would shorten that time.
But Iran is opening up. The new stock exchange is proof of that. Business with the outside world is growing daily. There are profits to be made, and that could help moderate this country and bring it out of isolation. That is why not every nation is sympathetic to American demands for a halt to high-tech trade. And Iranians want to know why they should pay the price.
I think it is in some sense barbarous to put the new ideas in science and technology in the black box and lock the box. This never happened in the history. I think it is very naivete if they think it is possible. It is very unfair also to deprive a nation from access to science and knowledge because they may be in the future a dangerous man.
As Iranians see their nation emerging from the shadow of isolation, attempts to block progress reinforce their view of outside interference. The world stood by as another country in this region built the bomb. This time the West may not wait to see if Iran becomes that dangerous man.